I'm Sam Otten, and with me is Jason Book. And in this video, we're going to be covering our top 5 Batman and Superman comics. So we've got some team ups, we've got some fights between the big heroes, Batman and Superman. And we wanted to kind of look through our comic history, getting ready for the big Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. So starting it off at number 5, we have Superman Batman Public Enemies. This was the first arc in the Superman Batman series written by Jeph Loeb, with art by Ed McGuiness, and this one was in 2003. So Jason, what'd you make of Public Enemies, and why did this one end up on our list?
Well, I've always thought that Jeph Loeb really has a great handle on Batman, and it was cool to see him write Superman as well. I like the way that the comic book kind of has the separate dialogue going on for each character, and it's very internal. It's like what they're really thinking. And I like that they refer to each other as Bruce and Clark. They're not talking about each other as Batman and Superman. I like a lot of that kind of stuff. I love the Ed McGuiness art. When he's on, his artwork is great, and it really conveys the action well. And I like that the story involved what was going on in the DC universe at the time with Lex Luthor and a lot of other great characters in the DC universe, and it really holds up, and that's why it turned into a good animated feature as well.
Yeah, people can definitely check out the animated version of it. It does a pretty nice job. But yeah, I like a lot of the things you said too. I like the parallel pages where they have the Batman strip coming down and the Superman strip coming down. I thought it was a nice partnership where you can see them having to come to trust each other. They each have to save each other at different points in the story. And they're just working together, using each other's strengths because they know each other pretty well. And you're right, it fits right in with the broader story arc that was happening with Lex Luthor being president at that time, and him kind of putting together this plan to try to work against Batman and Superman, but they overcome. And it's a nice story, them working together. And I agree with what you said. Jeph Loeb seems to really give respect and have a good handle on each of the characters in their own right, but then the way they play off each other. And really have to. I really like the parts where they have to really lean on each other and help each other out.
Yeah, totally. And it holds up too. Like I think it's gonna be a story that someone could go back and read years later and it'll still hold up well.
Yep. Next on our list, we've got Superman the Man of Steel, number 37, which is back in 1994. This is a story called Bats, written by Louise Simonson, with pencils by John Bagdanov. I actually don't know how to say his name. But what do you want to tell us about this issue, Jason?
Well, visually, because I like to draw, as you guys know, and comics are such a visual medium, it was really cool. It's one of those covers that will instantly catch your eye. So it's just really cool to see Superman kind of interfacing with all these different Batman, like the gruff Frank Miller Batman to like the Neil Adams Batman. And even though each of the versions of Batman only appear in a few panels, it's interesting that the writer really writes them in that voice properly. And Superman, it's kind of more of like a weird detective issue for Superman. He's trying to figure out what the heck is going on. But visually, it really stands out, and that's why it's on the list for me.
Yeah, and I think it's cool. I mean, it's cool creatively to find a way to bring those different Batmans in. It's also nice to just have an issue that's kind of a cool single issue to have.
Yeah.
And have it in your collection and pull it out and be like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is when these different Batmans were coming up. Rather than having to always, follow and get a 16-issue arc and make sure you haven't missed anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, it's part of the 0 Hour arc, which wasn't a great crossover, but it's cool that they did things like that in this issue. And I think I have another issue of Batman where it was, things coming from continuity that didn't exist anymore, like Batgirl not being paralyzed and things like that. So it's cool in a way to give, freedom for storytelling in that way.
Very cool. Next on our list is one that everybody's probably expecting, which is The Dark Knight Returns, specifically issue number 4, which is the last issue of the first Dark Knight Returns, written by Frank Miller, with also some art by Miller and Klaus Jansen. This is back in 1986. A big, very classic, legendary Batman story. But we do have Superman coming in, and in this one we've got a big throwdown. One of probably the most famous Batman-Superman fight. It was an inspiration for the new movie coming out. But this issue definitely makes our list. To me, I have some problems with the way that Superman's characterized, but I also recognize that Superman is kind of going along with the fight, and he's sort of, even at the end, with the big ending, I won't say anything specifically about it if you haven't read it, but Superman kind of goes along with it at the end, and so I feel like Frank Miller, he wasn't directly disrespecting Superman by making him like a patsy of the government. he was doing that a little bit, but I think there were also these hints of Superman kind of rising above and recognizing what was going on and kind of playing his part in it.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, it's something that's very much of its time. Dark Knight Returns is a story that you will be able to read for ages, but it does have some 80s things in there, and a lot of that is kind of that Reagan era government in there. And Superman definitely is kind of someone who goes along with that representation of the U.S. government then, and it makes for an interesting representation of the character. But it's not necessarily what I would always think of Superman. It's definitely through Frank Miller's eyes, but visually it's amazing. It holds up really well. I love also the parts with like the aged Green Arrow in there using his bow and arrow, missing an arm and stuff like that. Really cool. As an animated series, it's cool too. I didn't mind the DVD release, but just as a piece of a comic book, storytelling, it set the bar high. And as far as the Batman Superman fight, as you mentioned, man, like the movie has a big influence from this on its sleeve for sure. So I'm looking forward to see how they pull it off and how it works into the story of the entire movie.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, one thing that it did well was it just showed Batman having some things planned, and he kind of knew, like, okay, the fight's going to kind of go like this, and I'm going to have the electrocution ready, or I'm going to have the kryptonite arrow ready.
Yeah.
So it shows his preparation, and the classic, or it's going to become classic even more. So now the Superman fighting bat suit. So yeah, all that stuff is really good. It's really memorable, and it does look pretty visceral and kind of dirty and grungy on the page. So that makes it like a pretty intense fight as well.
Totally, yeah.
But yeah, and to me, it's important that I do think Superman was following Reagan's direction, but not all the way, because Superman, I think, was pulling his punches a little bit. And at the end, when Superman knows what happens, the fact that he still just like walks off, means he wasn't following Reagan's directions all the way. He was kind of like, you know what, I'm going to circumvent what Reagan sent me to do a little bit, because that actually is my friend over there.
That's right. Yeah, you got it.
All right, number 2 on our list is Batman number 612, which is part of the Hush story. This is written again by Jeph Loeb. This time the art is by Jim Lee, which also some great art in this one. And this was the big Hush fight between Batman and Superman, where Superman is being mind-controlled by Poison Ivy. But another pretty intense, pretty good fight between Batman and Superman.
Yeah, I love this one. It's probably one of my favorites. There's another story out there that's something similar that riffs on Superman. Had given Bruce the kryptonite ring, so they really make use of that, because Batman's got the ring and he's fighting him with it, and Superman's possessed by Poison Ivy. And there's an Alex Ross story I have reprinted somewhere that does something similar, where Superman is just kind of under the control of Lex Luthor, and it's the only way Batman can slow him down. And I just love stuff like this, and I really hope we get an aspect of this in the movie. And I think we will, because I'm thinking that if Batman has to fight Superman while he's kind of under the control of Lex Luthor, that they're going to touch on some of this stuff. I like the setting for this fight going into the sewers. The Poison Ivy angle is great, and the Jim Lee art is amazing for this. It works really well. And, we mentioned it, I think, later in our honorable mentions, when Superman is fighting the whole entire Justice League in the New 52 drawn by Jim Lee. That's pretty great, too.
Yeah, I agree on this one. This one, what I really liked, too, was, again, Batman has some gadgets, some things to try against Superman, but you can tell that it's not really going to work. It's not going to win the day.
Yeah.
But what ends up winning the day for Batman is he has this kind of famous line about, like, deep down, Clark, you're a good guy and I'm not.
Yeah.
And that's actually what he uses to win the fight, because he ends up like, well, I won't give that away either, but that's how he ends up using it, he uses Superman's goodness, and that goodness comes out, and that's how Superman's able to break free from Poison Ivy's control, and Batman kind of knew that, and that's how Batman was able to kind of turn the tide of the fight, which I thought was a really well-written, again, Jeph Loeb, I think, doing a good job on this stuff, writing not just the action of the fight, but writing the psychology of the fight.
Well, that's right. And as well, it goes to show you, even though this issue focuses on Batman a lot, what makes a good Superman writer like Jeph Loeb is that Superman's invincible unless you've got kryptonite. So you're not going to get him another way except dealing with, how you're going to get him? Well, you're going to go to people he cares about. And I think that's something that they really should play up in the movies as well, because it's a great plot point for Superman.
Right. I think that we could see something like that in this movie, like because there's people that he cares about. We got Lois, we've
Yep.
got Martha
That's
still.
right. Yeah.
Those could be a pressure point against Superman.
Totally.
So yeah, before we get to our number one, we did want to mention some honorable mentions, like Jason was alluding to. Here's a few. So World's Finest Comics number 88. This is back in 1957. That's when Batman and Superman face a team up of Lex Luthor and the Joker, and that's the first team up between those villains. So I think that's kind of cool to see the heroes teaming up and now they're villains teaming up. Jason really has a place in his heart for Action Comics Annual number 1, where it's Batman and Superman and vampires.
Oh yeah, yeah, great art by Art Adams. You can't beat it.
Cool. Superman number 712, which is part of the Grounded storyline. By J. Michael Straczynski, or however you say his name. That was in 2011. 2011, and Batman and Superman are like recounting to each other their first meeting with Vandal Savage. It's kind of a cool issue. Jason mentioned the new Justice League on the New 52, so this is in 2011. In issue 2 of that, the Batman and Green Lantern come and meet Superman and have a little bit of a throwdown. They're feeling out each other's powers and getting to know, or they don't really know each other yet, so that's a good one as well. And then I just finished reading Batman Superman number 28 to 30. It's a 3-part story called Universe's Finest by TomTaylor with art by Robson Roca. And that's an awesome standalone 3-part story that's not really connected to any other parts of the DC universe. It's just really well written. It shows Batman's cleverness and the good heart of Superman. So that's another one to pick out and check up, a very recent one.
Nice.
But that brings us to number 1 on our list, which is one that we think is just fitting because Batman v Superman's coming out, and they've been marketing it all with this hashtag who will win, who does win in this fight between Batman and Superman. So we've got Superman Batman number 78, which is called Who Would Win? And it's a cool story where kids are actually debating about the fight of Superman fighting Batman. And these kids are saying, like, oh, Superman would do this, Batman would do this. And then the comic book issue actually is illustrating the kids' imagination of how this fight would go down. And it like rises and rises and rises. And then there's kind of a cool thing at the end.
Nice.
So I thought that's just a cool issue to basically take these schoolyard debates and these debates that happen online now and put that into the issue and really let it play out.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. That's the one on our list I haven't read, and definitely look forward to checking that out.
Yeah, and I think, it's been fun to see the who will win. Like, DC has been asking some of the casts of their TV shows, like the cast of The Flash, the cast of Legends of Tomorrow. They've asked them who would win, and people are picking their sides. But, a lot of the same stuff comes up, but it is still a fun discussion to have. Like you have the cleverness and the gadgets of Batman up against Superman's powers. People always bring up kryptonite. People always maybe bring up that, like, well, Superman would hold back. That's how he is, but Batman would go dirty or something. So there's all these dynamics to go into it. Do you actually have, if you were writing a story, who would you write coming out on top?
Well, the only way that I'd have Batman winning is that if it was a story where Batman had to use his brain versus Superman's brawn. And like we were just talking about, not necessarily, putting someone's life in jeopardy where he knows they'll actually die, but playing on that Superman is gonna, save Lois Lane falling off a building versus letting Batman get away and get the upper hand kind of thing, right? So that's how I would write it. But as well, there's something cool about a possessed Superman almost killing Batman and then snapping out of it at the last second, because if he didn't have that moral compass, this is kind of the whole reason Batman's wanting to take him down in this movie, is because if something went wrong and Superman had a bad day, like we've seen in Injustice and things like that, he's capable of destroying anybody. So it can go either way. And as I've said before on the show, I think for the movie, it's going to be like, they'll probably have one fight where Batman kind of comes up on top, one where Superman almost kills him, and then one where they go, wait, we should be working together. That seems like how it'll go for me.
Yeah. If I were writing it, I would try to write a way for Superman to win, just because, as you can see, most of the time Batman wins. I think it's because writers want to have the underdog win, or writers want to find a clever way for Batman to win.
They might think it's more creative, or something like that.
So I would, because of that, I would just go the other way and write a way for Superman to win. But
as long as he didn't kill him.
Exactly. No. Yeah, it can't be to the death, but he can win the fight. So.
Sure.
All right, cool. That's our list of the top 5 Batman and Superman comics, and now we can go see how Batman and Superman do on the big screen.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Can't wait.